Story main theme: an alien queen selects a human warrior as her mate, drawn by his charm and valor, only to discover his deadly nature. The story explores love, trust, and the dangerous secrets that can exist even within a bond meant to unite species. The citadel of Zoria rose like a shard of crystal from the surface of the planet, catching the light of the twin suns in fractured beams that danced across the sky. Queen Lyra stepped onto the grand observation deck, her long ears twitching in the breeze, and regarded the candidates assembled below. They had arrived from the farthest reaches of the galaxy, each carrying a reputation, a set of skills, and a hopeful glint in their eyes. She tapped her fingers against the polished railing, thinking that the whole ceremony was absurd in its own way, serious enough to impress the advisors, but ridiculous in the daily logistics of selecting a mate. "I swear," she muttered to no one in particular, "if one of them tries to bow so low their nose touches the floor, I'm going to have to adopt a new dance form just to keep up." Her advisors, a mixture of stern diplomats and nervous technocrats, scribbled notes and whispered calculations that would determine which candidate could potentially bring strategic alliances to the Illinari. Lyra suppressed a smirk as one young ambassador nervously fumbled a holographic map of the galaxy, accidentally turning it into a spinning disco of constellations. "Impressive," she said dryly, "but I hope you're not planning to navigate warships like you navigate light shows." The group tittered nervously, but she only twitched her ears with amusement. Humor, she had learned, was a rare currency in her court. Then he arrived, Jerk. He stepped from his transport with the casual air of a human who believed the universe owed him a smile. The exosuit he wore gleamed in the sunlight, a patchwork of scratched alloy and glowing circuits, and he gave her a small bow that was almost playful in its precision. "Your ears are magnificent," he said, as if commenting on a particularly fashionable hat. "Practical too, I bet. Perfect for catching gossip at galactic banquets." Lyra's ears twitched, her composure almost faltering. "Do you make all your introductions with compliments, or is this a special occasion?" she asked, arching an eyebrow. He grinned, unabashed. "Special occasions deserve special flattery, and I hear you have a thing for humor." She blinked. She did. This human, with his easy charm and casual grin, was already rewriting her understanding of what an interspecies alliance could feel like. The other candidates looked formidable, with armor that gleamed like liquid metal and eyes that glowed faintly from genetic enhancements. Yet they all seemed stiff, robotic even, while Jerk moved like he belonged on a stage rather than a parade ground. He tripped over a hover drone once, laughed, and then complimented it on its surprisingly graceful recovery maneuver. Lyra found herself chuckling before she could stop it, feeling the kind of light amusement she hadn't allowed herself in decades. When the ceremonial demonstration began, Jerk's human competitors displayed skill, strength, and precision, but often lacked the subtlety that the Illinari valued, the quiet modulation of power, the way one could hold a strike just shy of harm for effect. Jerk, however, performed with a grace that was unsettlingly effective. He disarmed one opponent, missed the next by an inch, then spun and cracked a joke about low-gravity etiquette, sending Lyra's advisors into whispered debates about whether he was mocking them or genuinely entertaining the queen. She didn't care. The sound of laughter, mingled with the faint hum of energy shields and plasma sparring equipment, made the air feel lighter than it had in years. At lunch, served in a transparent pavilion that hovered above the citadel, Jerk insisted on trying Illinari cuisine. He examined a glowing gelatinous sphere, poked it with a fork, and then took a bite. His eyes widened in exaggerated horror. "This tastes like your mother was abducted by a chef from a neutron star and forced to cook." Lyra laughed aloud, her ears flicking, and even the stoic advisors cracked smiles. He shrugged. "No offense, Your Highness. I'm a simple human, my palate is a bit more terrestrial." She found his audacity refreshing, his humor a lens through which danger seemed less immediate. And yet, she could not ignore the way his reflexes moved. During a casual sparring demonstration afterward, he blocked a blow from an Elinari guard with the kind of effortless precision that bordered on inhuman. Lyra leaned against the railing of the training arena observing him. "You're either very talented or very lucky," she said. Jerk grinned. "A little of both, Your Majesty, but mostly luck and style, and maybe a touch of destiny." Lyra shook her head with a smile, her long ears twitching in disbelief. She wasn't accustomed to feeling uncertain about her choices. She had studied the stars, politics, and strategy for centuries, yet here she was, laughing at a human-esque quip while trying to determine if she could trust him with more than her amusement. By the time the evening gala arrived, Jerk had navigated gravity lifts, holographic etiquette simulations, and Ilinari poetry recitals, often clumsily but always with a charming grin. He had accidentally activated a series of ornamental drones, which began to orbit the palace hall like confused fireflies, and then pretended it was a traditional human greeting ritual. The guests were bemused, the advisors were frantic, and Lyra found herself applauding him as if she were watching a performance she hadn't realized she wanted to see. When the final vote came, Lyra rose from her seat, her ears flicking in decisive rhythm. "I have made my choice," she announced, her voice carrying across the marble hall. "Among these candidates, one has brought not only skill and courage but laughter, charm, and the occasional chaos that reminds us why we live and why we fight. I choose Jerk as my companion, my mate, and my ally." There was a pause, then a collective gasp from the advisors. Some whispered in awe, others in panic. Jerk, undeterred, bowed deeply, a smirk tugging at his lips. "I promise to be worthy," he said, "or at least to keep things entertaining while trying." Lyra's ears twitched with amusement, her heart fluttering in ways it hadn't in centuries. She could not have known that beneath his easy humor and disarming grin lay the precision and lethal efficiency of a warrior, unlike any she had ever met. The universe, it seemed, had just handed her both delight and danger wrapped in a human-shaped enigma. And so, with laughter echoing through the crystal halls, the first chapter of their interspecies alliance began, a story of charm, courage, and the faintest hint of chaos that would ripple across galaxies. Jerk settled into the citadel with the kind of casual confidence that made even the most disciplined Ilinari pause and wonder whether they should be impressed or concerned. The halls were vast, crystalline structures that seemed to hum with a quiet energy, and Jerk treated them like a playground. He tested gravity controls on the dining platforms, accidentally sent a floating tray of luminescent fruits spinning into the air, and then caught it with a flourish that made the staff gasp and giggle. Lyra's ears twitched as she observed him from the observation gallery above. "I swear," she murmured to herself, "if he manages to eat one of those without spilling, I might actually be impressed." When he did, she had to admit she was. Only a human could turn calamity into performance art and somehow make it charming. Breakfast in the Citadel was a complex affair, a mixture of traditional Ilinari cuisine and the occasional human indulgence Jerk insisted on importing from his home planet. He carried a small, suspicious-looking device that he claimed could translate flavors from one world to another. But the first test nearly caused the entire dining room to shimmer in green sparks. Lyra, watching his antics, had to stifle a laugh as he muttered, "Technical difficulties, Your Majesty. They're very literal." She shook her head, her long ears flicking in amusement. For all her centuries of protocol and precision, she found this human's chaos oddly refreshing. Training sessions were next, and Jerk approached them with a mixture of focus and levity that unnerved the guards. He demonstrated combat techniques with precision, deflecting energy blades with mechanical accuracy, while simultaneously cracking jokes about the ridiculous number of buttons on their suits. Lyra had arranged for a casual sparring match, thinking it would be a simple introduction to her people's martial culture. Instead, Jerk's movements were fluid, almost too perfect, and every guard he faced left slightly embarrassed and slightly confused. One young trainee complained afterward that Jerk moved like a sentient whip, but also kept making fun of our uniforms. Lyra's ears twitched with laughter at the report. She called him over and asked if he found the training dull. He shrugged. "Never dull, Your Highness. Just educational in ways I didn't expect. Also, I may have underestimated how pointy some of these gadgets are." Lyra decided it was time for him to learn more than just combat. She began showing him the subtleties of Elinari diplomacy, how to read tone, interpret the slight flick of an ear, the nuances in harmonized speech that could influence negotiations across multiple star systems. Jerk took it in stride, though his methods were unconventional. At one point, he misinterpreted a formal greeting and replied by juggling 3 holographic scrolls while reciting a limerick about interstellar trade, causing several ambassadors to tilt their heads in bewildered amusement. Lyra had to laugh despite herself. "I didn't think anyone could make political protocol this entertaining," she admitted. "You're turning serious governance into performance art." "I like to think of it as diplomacy with flair," he replied, bowing with a dramatic spin. As days passed, Jerk's human quirks became more apparent. He had a habit of speaking to the Citadel's AI systems as if they were sentient companions. He argued with the navigation matrix over breakfast routes, gave the defense drones nicknames, and even attempted to teach a holographic hologram to play chess. Lyra's ears twitched at every demonstration, half in amusement, half in curiosity. Despite the lightheartedness, she began noticing something deeper. Jerk's reflexes were unnervingly fast, his movements precise to the point that they seemed rehearsed in ways beyond human capability. Yet he laughed through it, cracked jokes mid-action, and somehow made lethal efficiency seem almost playful. One afternoon, while testing the Citadel's anti-gravity combat chambers, he accidentally triggered a security protocol, and the room lit up with hostile training drones. The other cadets panicked, but Jerk moved calmly. With a combination of flips, blocks, and deflections, he neutralized each drone, pausing only to quip, "Anyone else want to volunteer for a lesson in modesty?" Lyra's ears twitched with concern, but she couldn't deny that watching him in motion was mesmerizing. The precision, the lethal efficiency, and the casual humor created a tension she couldn't resolve with logic alone. Evenings were a different kind of chaos. Jerk insisted on exploring every corner of the Citadel with Lyra, from the zero-gravity libraries where floating data orbs drifted silently, to the observation decks where she explained the constellations visible from Zoria. He asked endless questions, often teasing her with humorous conjectures about the planet's histories, like suggesting that the twin suns were just celestial disco lights for alien parties. Lyra found herself laughing, realizing that humor, curiosity, and an unexpected sense of mischief were traits she hadn't anticipated in a mate or a companion. Yet the quiet moments, when Jerk seemed to almost vanish into stillness, revealed the edge beneath the levity. During a sparring simulation designed for practice, he moved with a speed that made shadows bend unnaturally, anticipating attacks before they fully materialized. Lyra, watching from above, felt a shiver of awareness. She had chosen him for charm and courage, for laughter and cleverness, yet there was something in him that defied simple explanation, an underlying intensity that hinted at dangers she was only beginning to understand. Dinner conversations in the Citadel were another spectacle. Jerk tried to master Elinari humor, which was subtle and often layered with tonal inflections that could change meaning entirely. He failed spectacularly, telling a joke meant to soothe a visiting dignitary and instead sparking an awkward debate over quantum culinary ethics. Lyra's ears flicked with amusement, and she found herself interjecting to salvage decorum, all the while laughing at his bewildered charm. Even the dignitary, initially irritated, eventually smiled, muttering something about humans being unpredictable but oddly refreshing. As the first month drew to a close, Lyra began to see the pattern. Jerk's combination of charm, humor, and lethal skill created an unpredictable harmony. He could make her laugh while executing combat maneuvers that would leave even seasoned warriors reeling. He could spill tea, trip over floating tables, and still maintain the aura of someone who could dismantle an entire strike team without breaking a sweat. Lyra realized that she had not only chosen a mate but had invited chaos and precision, humor and danger, into her life in equal measure. That evening, as they walked along the luminescent corridors, Jerk reached out to flick a control panel, sending a cascade of floating lights shimmering like fireworks across the hall. "I call this feature the Celebrate Your Queen mode," he said, grinning. Lyra's ears twitched in amusement and admiration. "You are impossible," she said, laughing. "And yet," she paused, her gaze meeting his, "you are unlike anyone I have ever met." He bowed mockingly, hand over heart, and replied, "I aim to please your majesty in all ways that count." The lights danced around them, laughter echoed through the corridors, and Lyra understood that living with him would be an adventure, dangerous and delightful in ways the universe had yet to reveal. The gala began with its usual pomp. Holographic banners floated in the air, displaying greetings in dozens of languages from neighboring systems, and the corridors buzzed with dignitaries in elaborate suits of shifting metals and fabrics that responded to mood. Queen Lyra moved among them with her characteristic grace, her long ears flicking in amusement as she listened to their polite debates over interstellar trade treaties and the merits of zero-gravity opera. At her side, Jerk was human, unapologetically, irreverently, ridiculously human. He had discovered a small grav bike in one of the corridors and insisted on showing the ambassador from Nyrath how it could be used for elegant formal entrances. He zipped through the pavilion, narrowly missing a chandelier, and landed in a perfect bow that left the dignitaries blinking, some in awe, some in mild terror. Lyra's ears twitched in laughter. "I must say," she whispered, leaning close so only he could hear, "you make diplomacy theatrical." "I call it efficiency with style," Jerk replied, grinning. "Also hazard avoidance training." He winked, and Lyra found herself shaking her head, torn between amusement and a nagging sense of foreboding she couldn't yet place. The evening's entertainment was interrupted when alarms blared through the citadel. A rogue faction from a neighboring system had infiltrated the perimeter, seeking to steal experimental technology and destabilize Ilinari trade routes. The guests froze, and a wave of panic rippled through the pavilion. Lyra's advisors scrambled to initiate defense protocols, but before they could fully mobilize, Jerk was already moving. He flipped a table to block the nearest hover drones, tossing drinks into the air with the kind of precision that left glasses intact, then vaulted over the railings, landing silently on the corridor below. Lyra's ears twitched nervously as she followed, activating her personal energy shield. She watched him disarm attackers with grace that was almost artistic, each movement accompanied by a casual joke or comment. "Is it me, or are these guys alarmingly polite for intruders?" he said as a mercenary dove toward him, only to find his trajectory gently but decisively redirected into a padded wall. Lyra realized, even in the heat of the moment, that she had underestimated the extent of his capabilities. The lethal precision he had demonstrated in training, once tempered by humor, was now fully exposed, but so was his ingenuity. He rigged the gravlifts to send attackers spinning gently into containment zones, used energy conduits to redirect drones, and somehow managed to throw a perfect quip at a panicked ambassador who was hiding behind a floating sculpture. "If it makes you feel better," he said, "this is exactly how we handle surprise parties on Earth." By the time reinforcements arrived from the Citadel's outer defenses, Jerk had neutralized the majority of threats, leaving only small pockets of resistance that were quickly subdued. Lyra descended into the corridor beside him, her long ears twitching with a mixture of relief and astonishment. "You didn't just protect the Citadel," she said. "You made it entertaining." He gave a mock bow. I aim to please your majesty, even under pressure. She shook her head, smiling, realizing that for all his human unpredictability, she trusted him more than anyone else in the galaxy. After the last of the attackers had been secured, the dignitaries cautiously emerged from hiding. Their reactions were varied: awe, fear, and incredulous amusement. The ambassador from Nirath, who had nearly been flattened by a grav-lift misfire, offered a stiff nod. Your warrior, he said carefully, is unlike any protector I have ever seen, efficient, creative, and disturbingly polite. Lyra's ears twitched in laughter. You have no idea, she replied. That night, in the quiet of the Citadel's observation deck, Lyra and Jerk watched the twin suns set, their light reflecting across the crystalline towers like liquid fire. Jerk leaned against the railing, smudges of dust and sparks on his exosuit, and shrugged. Well, that was an eventful evening, he said. I'm starting to think I'm too much trouble for formal gatherings. Lyra nudged him with an elbow. You are precisely the kind of trouble we need. He laughed, the sound echoing softly through the deck. I've learned a lot here, he said, about gravity, diplomacy, and apparently how to make combat look like a performance art. And I've learned a lot from you, your majesty. She raised an eyebrow. Oh, enlighten me. He looked out over the horizon, a hint of seriousness threading through his grin. I've learned that leadership isn't just about power or ceremony. It's about trust, even in moments that feel impossible. And I've learned that humor can be a weapon as sharp as any blade, or as comforting as any shield. Lyra considered his words, her ears flicking thoughtfully. For centuries, she had ruled with precision, with calculated strategy, with an adherence to protocol that left little room for unpredictability. But with Jerk, she had found that chaos could coexist with order, humor could coexist with danger, and affection could coexist with lethal skill. She realized that her understanding of courage, partnership, and loyalty had expanded in ways she had not anticipated. As dawn broke, bathing Zoria in a gentle golden light, Lyra took Jerk's hand. The galaxy is vast and unpredictable, she said, but perhaps it doesn't have to feel so terrifying when you face it with someone like you. He grinned, squeezing her hand in return. And perhaps I've learned that even the most meticulous queen can appreciate a little human chaos. He paused, glancing around the glittering towers. Also, I think we make a great team, deadly and charming, terrifying and hilarious. All at once. Lyra laughed, ears flicking in delight. All at once, indeed. She felt a warmth in her chest, a certainty she hadn't known she could feel. The Citadel, the galaxy, the delicate dance of diplomacy and danger, it was no longer intimidating. It was theirs, together. They returned to the main hall as the dignitaries resumed their conversations, now tinged with a cautious admiration for the pair. Jerk, ever irreverent, waved at the visitors and quipped, "Try not to trip over any rogue gravlifts on your way out." Lyra laughed again, realizing that the absurdity of the universe was part of its charm, and with the right companion, even chaos could feel like home. By the end of the day, alliances had been secured, threats neutralized, and laughter had echoed through halls that had once been solemn. Lyra understood that in Jerk she had found more than a warrior. She had found a partner who could challenge, protect, and surprise her in equal measure. And Jerk had found more than a queen. He had found a home, a stage for his antics, and a bond that combined danger with delight. As night fell over Zoria, they stood together on the balcony, the city of crystals shimmering beneath them, twin moons rising in the distance. Lyra leaned against him, ears flicking softly, and allowed herself a rare sigh of contentment. The galaxy was vast, unpredictable, and sometimes absurd, but for the first time in her long life, she felt ready to face it. With Jerk by her side, every danger became a game, every challenge a performance, every moment a story worth living. And for the first time, she allowed herself to hope that laughter, love, and lethal skill could coexist, and perhaps even thrive, together in a universe that was as unpredictable as it was magnificent.